G'day everyone, welcome to Shooting the Breeze with Lady Liberty. I am Lady Liberty or Kate Fantanell and I am back in my home state of Western Australia. I flew in late last night from over east. I'm here because there is an election on the 8th of March and I am sitting here with my dear friends from the Legalise Cannabis WA Party, of which I am a proud member. I have my little ladle here. Dr. Brian Walker, the leader of the party, he's been a voice for shooters and for liberty in the Parliament the past 4 years, and Jim Matters, the candidate who is running in Secret Harbour against Police Minister Paul Papalia. Welcome to the show. How are we? I'm glad to be back in WA. I'm just so excited to be here.
Kate, it's great to see you again. We've missed you. We really have missed you. As Kate has said, I'm Brian Walker. I'm the leader of the Legalise Cannabis Party, and I stand here for the freedom of the people, to be a free people in a free country. And I am looking forward to another term in Parliament, causing a bit of havoc and chaos, but asking the questions which need to be asked and holding the government to account. And I would be so pleased to have accompanying me in Parliament my dear friend, Jim Matters, who is, I think he's, well, introduce yourself, Jim. Who are you?
Thank you very much. I'm Jim Matters. I live in the Rockingham Secret Harbour area and I will be the candidate for Secret Harbour. I'm passionate about cannabis reform and also making sure that the legislations that are being rushed through currently with the firearms are held to account.
It'd be great to see you in Parliament.
Thank you.
Now, Jim, you are running in a very high profile seat. I nearly put my hand up to run in that seat of Secret Harbour because I have a personal grudge to bear against the Police Minister after seeing the laws that he's brought in this state, the limits on the number of private property you can own, the health checks on firearm owners, the storage requirements that people will not be able to adhere to. You have got it hard against you because that is such a strong seat for Labor and they will be throwing everything at that seat. Do you think you have a chance of winning? And if you are elected, what are your priorities for the people of Secret Harbour?
Excellent. Thanks, Kate. Most certainly. I certainly have a chance of winning because people are sick of the same old, same old. They really are. And they've seen that for the last several years, both state and federal level, and they want change. Now, I've just come from the military and my specific job was gunnery. So I dealt with firearms, or we used to call them weapons, firearms on a daily basis. And I strongly believe that a responsible culture around firearms is needed. So the way I see it again is there's two elements to firearms, and there is the personal protective equipment that the law enforcement and the military use on a daily basis, and security as well, and also vermin control for the farmers. That's the work side of firearms. And then to make sure that people are safe and they know how to use their firearms properly, we need a culture that surrounds it. So healthy culture includes game hunting, target shooting, competition amongst humans about how they can accurately fire and safely and so on. That is extremely important. If we criminalise those people and we take those firearms away from them and we say, oh, you can have a couple, but all these other restrictions, you end up vilifying those people. And then if there's a will, there's a way, and people potentially go underground and do things illegal. So we don't want that. So the first thing we should do is make sure that we are considered in our approach to responsible firearm ownership and use on a daily basis.
And Dr. Walker, you've been in this Parliament for 4 years, so you have seen the consultation that Labor has done with the firearm owning community. You've seen how they just have not listened to the people and they're serving, like you said at the start, their own factions, their own party, and not what the people want. How would you describe your time in Parliament working with Labor, especially in relation to the firearm law reforms?
Well, the first thing to be said is that Labour is exactly the same as the Liberal side. They are the same. They may have different nuances on each side of the spectrum, but they're the same. They behave the same. What the one accuses the other of doing, that's been done to them. So let's take, for example, consultation. I'll give you an example, a classic example of what we had then was the environmental laws, which were recently changed. In fact, they still more defanged the Environmental Protection Agency. And they said repeatedly, we have consulted widely, and they had, only with the industry. All of the environmentalists and the specialists in environmental protection, not a single one was consulted. So the consultation was geared entirely to making this law as stringent as possible on behalf of the industrialists. and causing us in the future great problems in our environment. That was called consultation. Same thing happened with the Aboriginal cultural heritage. I had approach after approach. They haven't consulted with us, said the Indigenous people. Oh, we've consulted widely, and they hadn't. They consulted in a small group of those with the views that reflected what they wanted to put through. Now, let's look at the consultation for firearms. Having established a pattern, having established the precedent, did they consult widely? Well, one group I was speaking to, they had a consultation with the police, who'd written the act, by the way, the bill, and they had their questions out there and the concerns with the legislation, and the answer came back, nope, this is what we're going to do, this is what's happening, and the next morning the bill was presented. They'd already written the bill to put before Parliament, so the consultation was a sham. And then they have the temerity to suggest they consulted widely and the idea was to keep the people safe. Well, look, who is causing the problem with the firearms? It's not the people who legally and lawfully abide by the firearms legislation, it's the criminals. And if you look at the 1973 legislation, which they replaced, and it has to be replaced, it's an old, improper legislation, they refused to give me the figures of what's actually going on. I had to do my own research to find out what the police refused to tell me. We're asking questions in Parliament, and the answer from the Minister comes back, we haven't got the data. Well, this data is there, I found it. So it turns out that about 3/4 or more, of the firearms issues we had in the previous 4 years were caused either by people on bail, people who were established criminals, or people with established mental health issues, all of whom should not have had firearms present at all. So the actual the police had not done the job required of by the original legislation. Are they going to do any better with the new legislation? So we've been oppressed. The firearms users, the legally abiding lawful firearms users are being oppressed, but the criminals are, no, off you go. They even, and this is what happened, the Minister allowed a map to be produced in the West Australian newspaper. Now, I sat a few days later with someone in the firearms community who used that map from the West Australian and produced, at the end of a few shenanigans with the computer, produced a handbook with the names and addresses of firearms owners sorted by handgun owners and long weapon owners. Is that in the hands of the black market right now? You can bet your bottom dollar it is. So who actually contributed to the theft, criminals thieving legally obtained firearms? The Police Minister, who then refused to acknowledge this. He lied actually to Parliament and the people, saying, no, you can't do that, it's all been anonymised. He lied, because, and I know he lied, the first time it might have been a mistake, but when I informed him of this, he ignored that entirely and continued to repeat that lie.
So this is what you're up against, Jim, a pathological police minister who lies to the public, and you, a law-abiding ex-firearm owner, ex-military, proud father, proud South Australian like me who now calls WA our home. Is there anything that you would like to say to the police minister as you're running against him? What message would you say to him from your perspective as a member of his electorate?
Excellent, good question. Well, I'd just like to say thank you for trying. He is trying. They are trying to do something for public safety, but you need to listen. Listen more. Listen to your people. There is feedback coming from your community who don't want this current act to come into force. Listen. That's it. It's your job. It's your prerogative to listen and take heed to what your humans are saying. They're your people.
And something that I'm doing now that I'm not running for office is I have launched legal action to challenge these gun laws in the courts. That's the way I think we can get the quickest change. If we do have people like Dr. Brian Walker and Jim Matters in Parliament, they will be pushing for a review of the Firearms Act, is something that they have promised. In the meantime, we don't want to wait 4 years. We cannot live under these tyrannical laws. So I'm fundraising to take the laws to court, and you can donate to that if you like. Dr. Walker?
Well, there's an update. The regulations which were introduced in the prorogued period of Parliament, I have already spoken with the Parliament, and I will be putting in a motion for disallowance of those regulations. Now, it's going to be defeated, of course, because the government doesn't want to see their own legislation being defeated through the regulations, but it will happen, and the people can then respond in their views. What are we actually doing? We're trying to get some sensible review of the legislation. Will it happen? Well, If the people shout loud enough, yes, it will. But do you know what's happened? The police minister has deemed all firearms owners to be criminal. He's criminalised us. Now, he then said, we've got 90,000 weapons we've taken off the streets. Hang on, they were locked away in firearm safes, ammunition held separately, the bolts were held separately, and he says they've been taken off the streets, implying that the society is now safer because there's less weapons being carried around the streets. I mean, that's an abuse of power, of misinforming the people to come to a conclusion which is patently false. And this is the dirty side of politics.
Thank you for enjoying my pleasure of talking about firearms, but let's talk about cannabis. You are the Legalise Cannabis Party of Western Australia. I am a proud member of your party. I have my little badge here. I joined because Dr. Brian Walker, you have been such an inspiration for me and for shooters and for people who use cannabis medicinally. Has there been any progress during the last 4 years in cannabis legislation and reform? I know you've been pushing for changes to THC driving tests. There is a big issue with miners who work on our mine sites in this beautiful state who get tested and are fired if they have THC in their system. Where are we at in WA with cannabis reform?
Well, the first part is that I have asked over 240 questions in Parliament regarding cannabis specifically. And the government has constantly and continually and consistently refused to acknowledge any need for change in the regulations or the legislation. So that's on the table. They're not going to make any changes. On the other hand, I have spoken, there's about over 1,800 individual references to cannabis now in Hansard. It's become normalised. And it's also true that the majority of the members in Parliament have actually used cannabis at some stage. And it's true that the majority actually agree with my points that I'm putting out on a regular basis in Parliament. And I've even had one minister confide in me that the legislation is such that within 5 years, this minister reckons that cannabis will be legalised.
If Labor get back in?
No, I'm not sure that was the intent of the comment. The world is moving to understand that we have, as a world, been lied to. Look, I'm a fundamentalist. I don't deal with the problems out there. I like to get down to the very bottom. What's the root cause of all this? Deal with this, then these problems vanish. Okay? What is the root problem of cannabis? Tell me.
It's been stigmatised in the media. I really don't know actually what the problem is. It's a plant. I think that humans should be able to consume plants that God put on this earth and that we have control over our own bodies.
Well, 3 people were hanged in Singapore last year for having cannabis because it's a narcotic. Now, the term narcotic is a medical term, but politicians and lawyers many years ago decided they're going to call cannabis a narcotic. And then they created the international legislation, the Unified, the Single Drug Convention, describing cannabis in America Schedule 1, unfit for any purpose, as a narcotic, which is a lie. And then that international legislation was taken on to national bodies of different countries. And then that made in Australia, the state legislation is all beholden to the concept of cannabis being a narcotic, a lie. So we have an international lie being produced and replicated, and our legislation is reflecting a lie. Are we, as a people, comfortable having a lie enshrined in legislation? Now, there's another lie here, that they decided that the presence of THC is equivalent to being impaired. Now, that is a proven lie. Proven multiple times, it's a lie. And yet the police are required to detain people who have got a positive THC sample, even if there's no mention whatsoever of any impairment. In fact, they don't even test for impairment. And that person is now declared to be a drug user. They lose their license, or they have implications on their as a criminal. And they can now no longer, say, visit the US because they're now declared to be a drug user, a criminal, and therefore banned entry into the US. So we have lies, plural, enshrined in law. There's not just these, plenty more. So I have been working to get the people aware that we're voting for politicians who are quite comfortable having a lie enshrined in law. And I think what needs to happen is think differently, choose differently, because the way you've been going just now is actually making all this mess. Are we better than we were, say, 40 years ago? We're not. If you carry on making the same old choices, we're going to get the same old problems. Stop it.
And Jim, Why did you decide to put your hat in the ring for Legalise Cannabis? You told me that you're more of a conservative, but you're running for a party that in this state I would say is more libertarian, probably the most libertarian party we have in WA. So why did you decide to run with Legalise Cannabis?
Excellent. Well, I was in the ADF for 15 years. Fantastic. Anyone who's got the option, join. It's fantastic.
My son is there now.
Thank you for your service.
So make sure you join that. Post-separation from defence, I had some chronic pain within my neck and shoulder. I went to the doctor and I said, "Doctor, my neck hurts." And he said, "Okay, all right, well, we can prescribe you cannabis products for your chronic pain." Excellent. And he said to me, and he lied to me, he said, "Jim, it's not a panacea. It won't help everything, but it will definitely help you for your chronic pain." And I said, "Okay." And I went back to see him a month later and I said, "You lied to me, doctor. It is a panacea. It has reduced my pain, my anxiety, depression has gone away, and the biggest one for me is I'm able to sleep well at night." And everybody knows if you have a good night's sleep, you wake up feeling refreshed, you can achieve anything. But the big ones for me, yes, was the insomnia and the fact that it kept me off alcohol altogether, because I was using alcohol to self-medicate, along with other antidepressants which are thrown at defence members to try and make them normalise. None of that helped. Cannabis did help. So my argument now to everyone is cannabis helps. It's not part of the problem, it's part of the solution. It's not a poison. We deal with it naturally in our bodies, and that's why it sticks around for a lot longer than all the other drugs that go into your body and they're processed really quickly. It stays, it's part of us. It's a good thing. So when I said to the doctor, I said, "Can I don a green or a white shirt and help out?" And he said, "Yes, how would you feel about running?" And I said, "Sir, I'm in, let's go." So I was fortunate enough to be able to run, and my electorate of Secret Harbour, I feel passionate about Secret Harbour and surrounds. I actually feel passionate about that whole area. I strongly believe that we're all one people. Anything south of the river is one people. Those northerners, I don't know. but really, it's good for all people. So in my electorate, I am aiming to normalise cannabis use for recreational purposes ultimately. And that's just one side of it. The biggest part is actually hemp. We can use hemp for everything. But did you know we can make plastic out of hemp? It's roughly twice as expensive as normal plastic because it's not normalised. And when we can normalise that, you can make plastic straws out of hemp. Fantastic. And that would be good. That's not going to go in the turtles' noses. But that's it. You can use it for everything. You use it to build a house. So many things. There's protein power with 34 grams of protein per 100 in hemp seeds. That's unbelievable. So vegetarians, get your protein from hemp. It's huge. It's much bigger. And I had no idea. Originally coming from Adelaide, I thought it was, that's something from a drug dealer would sell you. And also now, leading back into the FIFO discussion and defence, if you have a weekend for recreation and you decide that I'm over beer or over alcohol, and you go, "Okay, I'm going to try some cannabis," the guy's going to go, "Here you go, I've got cannabis, but I've also got methamphetamine, and I've also got cocaine, and I've also got a myriad of other drugs which will be out of your system in 2 days." And that's dangerous, because that's when we lead into addiction, we lead into criminals, where we're really funding that in that regard. But cannabis will stick around for longer, and you'll provide a urine analysis, and you'll be tested, and you'll be treated the same as if you were shooting heroin through your eye, which is ridiculous in my opinion. So just to summarise, it's more than just munchies. It is. It's a big thing. The plant is fantastic, and I want to spread that.
What would a legalised cannabis model look like in Western Australia? So federally, there are some laws that you still have to get around. So what is your proposal for legalising it in WA? What are the steps that you would go to? What is the tax model? What would that look like? How does your policy differentiate from the Greens, who have been pro-cannabis since they were formed?
Well, it's nice that the Greens are pro-cannabis, but they've achieved precisely nothing with all they've been doing over the last 20 years. I support their moves. Anyone who's going to help us in this would be welcome. But what I'm looking for, bearing in mind, people think we're a single-issue party, and we're not. The cannabis is the tip of an iceberg, and there's so many things which follow on from that. We actually produced an economic paper showing that if we were to legalise recreational cannabis, there would be, over the 4-year forward estimates, $1.25 billion, conservatively estimated, which would be available for the government to fund hospitals and aged care and daycare and maybe helping the homeless. You know, there's minor things. Minor things. And what have they done? Well, they've actually pissed on it. They said, no, we don't want that. And if they had opened up the recreational cannabis, but I don't use recreational cannabis. I don't need to. I'm living actually the life of Riley, so I don't need to have a mind-altering substance. Maybe the occasional gin and tonic or whiskey, but just the occasional. And the occasional cannabis as well. But if we took away the fear of THC, which is the underlying problem of all this, a fear of THC because it's going to kill people, 0 deaths over, well, whenever. If we took away the fear of THC, we'd open up the whole hemp industry. Now, I did a calculation about that. Now, my calculations are back of the envelope of $73 billion for Western Australia. But let's make it conservative. Let's call it $20 billion. Could we maybe balance our exports, imports with iron ore, maybe have a safer economy? Could we build up perhaps a better balance of trade with our Asian partners, working together for a geopolitical sense of unity and harmony? Would that be helpful? Yes, it would. I think it would. And so the idea about cannabis as something dangerous and as a drug of addiction, which is not, a dangerous drug which is not, a drug which causes psychosis, which it doesn't actually. Well, there's issues with that, but it is not the case. You take cannabis, you'll get psychosis. You won't. So we've really got to get to grips with the idea that we need to follow truth, we need to follow science, question science by all means, but follow the outcomes, and then serve the people. For example, a farmer getting maybe on a good year $700 per hectare for wheat. You could, with using all of the hemp plant, $23 million per hectare. Which farmer wouldn't want that? And then it would actually turn the topsoil from Yeamite to about 90 centimetres of good quality topsoil, excellent worms, good microbe content, doubling your yield, for example, of canola or wheat later when you're rotating the crop, helping the water supplies into your rivers and lakes, rejuvenating, if you like, our water resources, helping with the microclimate change. There's so many good things we could do if only we stopped being frightened of something about which there is no need for fear in the first place.
Now, I'm going to throw a curly question into you boys, and I'll start with you, Jim. You have your How to Vote card in front of you.
Yes.
Talk to me about preferences, because there's been some people online who are a bit uncomfortable with the fact that you've got Labor in the upper house, but I know you put Papalia last on that ticket.
Yes.
Can you just explain to voters, because there's a lot of confusion, what does this mean? If they follow this, will this get what we want in Parliament? Just explain what preferences are and how you came to preference these people on your ticket.
So with regards to the preferencing, so we have chosen the Liberals as our number 2 position, and so on. We also have the Greens as number 3, 4 as Liam Hall for One Nation, 5 is Elizabeth Storer for the Animal Justice Party, 6 is Robert Burdett for the Australian Christians, and number 7 is Paul Papalia for WA Labor. So this is in direct response to the firearms issue that we're having at the moment, having that policy rushed in. So this, traditionally we look for a balanced approach to ensure that our main issue is the legalisation of cannabis, and that's how we target that. This is a little bit different because we have a pressing issue that will adversely affect our farmers and our police force and the culture surrounding firearms. So that is why we've preferenced Labor last in this instance, but normally Labor are quite sympathetic, at least at the superficial level, to cannabis policy, but when it comes to the crunch and we actually need to get legislation through, it's not been happening. So this is why we've put Papalia last and the Labor Party in this instance.
And Dr. Walker, let's talk about your upper house ticket. So you're number 1 on the ticket. You have a different representative running number 2, and then you've got my good friend Craig Buchanan number 3. How did you come to decide on your preferences? Because I know you've got the Greens and Animal Justice Party up there, but you've also got Shooters and Fishers on there too. So how did that come about?
Well, first of all, has to be said, the preferences that we put out there is not you, this is, if you vote for us, this is what's going to happen. We recommend that everyone choose the preference they're comfortable with. It's your free choice as a free person in a free country, well, allegedly free country, to make your choices as you think fit. This is our recommendation based on the very sensible advice that Jim has given. And by the way, in other assembly seats, there's different preferences. Okay, so in the upper house is a bit different. You see, the main question we have got is what is the best use of our members of parliament? Now, if you have, let's say, 2 or 3 members in the assembly, you've got the large side on the government, the large side on the opposition, a few voices there, and you are simply drowned out. We don't have enough power to force legislation to happen in the assembly. So the main impetus is going to be for getting enough representation in the upper house, where, what happens? We scrutinise legislation. Now, in the last term of Parliament, we couldn't do that because the government just rattled through with their agenda, not needing a single vote from any other party to allow the legislation to go through, which meant that we have now got legislation which is not fit for purpose, but said, nah, we wrote it perfectly, through it goes, and it's a democratically chosen Parliament. Look, it's not been the case. We have got insufficient legislation as a result of the hubris of a government thinking that they can make all the choices and we just have to sit and take it. In this current Parliament, we're going to have a significant change. The number of the Labour side is going to go down, we know that. The opposition, the Liberals and Nats, that's going to go up a little bit, only a little bit, I hope. The crossbench is going to be much larger, meaning that what we can now do is hold the government to account. And if the legislation is going to be acceptable, we'll vote with you on that to serve the people. If it can be improved, we'll put amendments there, which the government, during the last term of Parliament, there's only one bill went to Legislation Committee, just the one. And that's the whole purpose of the committee is to look at that. And the amendments that went through, I can count on the fingers of less than one hand how many amendments from opposition and from crossbench came through. So we need to ensure that if changes can be made, if we examine the legislation, and we may take half an hour to pass a bill, we may take 2 weeks to thoroughly examine a bill, okay, to make sure it serves its purpose. And if it's not serving the purpose, then we can vote against it, not because we think it's a bad idea. Take, for example, the Aboriginal cultural heritage, a good idea, just a bad bill. And we wanted to improve that, to amend that, not a chance. In this term of Parliament, we're confident that when we say this is not good enough, the government's got to listen, because otherwise the bill will fail. So we need to get a large number of Legalise Cannabis members in the upper house as much as possible. We depend on your votes and indeed your preferences. So we have arranged with the other parties there that our preferences, or the preferences that they want to express, will flow ultimately toward Legalise Cannabis, so that when it comes to the lower levels of the quota, we can get maybe one more in Parliament. Every single voice counts, and that's the purpose behind the how to vote cards. It's not we're saying this is a good party and that's a good party and we don't like this party here. No. What we're saying is you can choose what you like, but to help us get more members in Parliament, this is what we're going to recommend.
Fantastic. Now, Western Australia, this is my home state. I'm so happy to be back. I'm so happy to be here with Dr. Brian Walker and Jim Matters. They're the first people I've come to see since my return. Jim, Dr. Brian Walker, what do you want WA to look like in 4 years' time? We have lived through 4 years of a one-party state. We've talked today about some of the terrible things that have happened because of one party ruling the roost. Jim, what would you like WA, our home state, to look like in 4 years?
I'd like to see ultimately less government, because I think people deserve the respect and the responsibility on their own terms. I would like to see the government that we do have to provide responsible legislation to allow people to be free and do what they need to do. And that includes all of the social justice thought processes that go on. They need to be free to do that themselves, not to be controlled by the government to say this is what you can and cannot do outside of safety. Safety is important. So that's what I would like to see.
And Dr. Walker?
I would like to live as free people in a free country. So we need to have less restrictive laws and more ability to choose for our own selves what helps us, as long as no one else is being hurt. So, for example, we've got the cost of living crisis here, we've got the housing crisis. How about if we free up THC and allow us to build hemp housing? Do you know there's a teenager can put together the walls of a house in modular form in 8 days at a fraction of the cost of the current housing, filled it with hemp, or indeed, if it's ADF, we can fill it with sand to put into a place of defence. And we could then have a lot more housing, which you don't have to heat in winter or cool in summer because hemp is self-insulating. And we could do that. How about if you don't need to feed the air conditioner or feed the heater, so if you're having a bit of trouble with your finances, you don't have to pay those utility bills? How about if we allowed the tax system to be redeveloped? Now, this is actually a federal thing, and we're having a federal election coming soon. Again, vote 1, legalise cannabis, because we have this strong intent of actually transforming the way that we are taxed. We are being abused by a tax system which allows the ultra wealthy, and we're talking large corporations, to pay almost no tax, whereas people who are struggling, doing it tough, are paying a percentage of tax which is indecent. So let's fix this. Let's look, for example, how could we house the people who are unhoused? Let's look at how can we reduce the amount of domestic violence by actually encouraging people to use homegrown cannabis. So rather than getting drunk and beating your partner, you can actually chill out with some healthy cannabis and just have a better quality of life. Less in the way of the tax in Northbridge and other places of entertainment. So we can actually live a life where you can walk down the street and not be assaulted. So we get law and order. The police will be freed up to actually look after us. Did you know, for example, the change in policing in Portugal, once they decriminalised all drugs, they could now medicalise people doing it tough. And as a result of that, the community changed. We deserve better.
So you've heard it here first. Vote 1, legalise cannabis on the 8th of March. Pre-poll has opened here in WA. So if you're heading out to vote, please have a look at the policies on the website of Legalise Cannabis. Dr. Brian Walker, thank you for everything you've done in this term of Parliament. As I said, you've been an inspiration. You've been a beacon of hope for me during the time that I lived here. I know that we'll see you back in the Parliament, hopefully with a few more friends, including my friend Craig and Jim Matters. All the best in Secret Harbour. I'm coming to campaign there with you. We've got to organise something. I've got to bail up that police minister. He's blocked me on Facebook, you know that. So I've just got to go and introduce myself in person. But thank you for joining me. I will be interviewing more candidates while I'm here on the ground in Perth. I'm so happy to be back. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.